In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, Leif Thulin is going to rank the top bigs in the 2025 NBA draft. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, and my co-host for today is none other than my guy, Leif Thulin, the man that watches more college basketball than anyone else. And in this episode, he is going to rank his top bigs. He's going to talk about who has the highest floor and who has the highest ceiling out of the big men from the 2025 NBA draft class. But before we get started, I want to let you know that if you have not subscribed to the Locked On NBA Big Boy YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, share, comment, and click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode. The last few days, we've had some surprise live episodes, so make sure that you click the bell so you can be notified whenever we drop, because, we really haven't been planning on doing live. We just said, hey, James, you want to go live? Hey, Leif, you want to go live? So we may have a few of those over the next few days because the NBA draft is right around the corner. What is it, 5 days, 4 days, something like that?
Yeah, 5 days.
5 days. Can't wait. I still haven't bought my ticket to New York, but I will definitely be in New York. Oh, no, I take that back. I bought my ticket. I haven't booked my hotel. So if you see me in New York and I'm out with my bags on the sidewalks because I wasn't able to find a hotel at a decent price. But anyway, let's get right into this episode. All right. First of all, what's your opinion on the top bigs in this class? Do you think it's a strong class for bigs? I know I've talked to some teams that they like the bigs, but they don't love any of them. There's not a lot of 7-footers in this class. I know, for example, Atlanta is looking for a legitimate 7-footer. And from everything I've heard, they're trying to move up to get Khaman Maluach. Don't know if they can get up to the number 6 range from what I hear, that's probably the range that they need to get to. But anyway, with that being said, what's your thoughts on this class of bigs?
I think it's solid but unspectacular. I like a couple of these guys that are in the mid-tier a lot more than I think the consensus. You and I have been on the Maxime Raynaud train for a long time, and I think he's now getting his deserved respect. As for the top guys, I think it really is situationally based because I think Khaman Maluach likely goes ahead of Derik Queen. But there's a landing spot for Derik Queen that I really like, and it's Washington. And if I don't think the Wizards will take him at 6, but if he were to go number 6, I could see an all-star future as he's kind of the conduit to their offensive success, and they have someone who can make up for some of his weaknesses in Sar as his front court mate. So I'm optimistic. I like Derik Queen's ceiling even more than Maluach, even though Maluach, that everyone says, is further away from his ability to impact the game and all that. I actually think Khaman Maluach is a higher floor than Derik Queen. Derik Queen's got a higher ceiling than Maluach, so I think I'm inversed on the majority there. But it really depends landing spot for each of those guys. I think Queen needs a team that has other front court members who are defensively very good. And Khaman Maluach, I think you can plug and play in a lot of places. He's just going to develop at a set rate. You have to be okay with the month-to-month and year-to-year development of Khaman Maluach because he started basketball at 14. Like, there's just basketball skills that you learn and you need to learn and get the real repetitions of against grown men and the best athletes in the world that I think he'll have some tough nights against. But, he's a skilled player. So I do really like some of these bigs. I just think it's a class that doesn't have a top 5 caliber big in the draft. Like, you're not getting a top 5 pick out of a big, in my opinion. But I think there's a good depth of bigs. I think there's the bigs on the board here that you can see if you're watching on YouTube, and even a couple more that I think could be drafted in the first round.
So let's talk about the Maluach Derik Queen debate, right? So on the surface, you would say Derik Queen is more skilled. He was more productive, and he's further along. However, you can say, well, Maluach is bigger. He's longer. He has the easier role as far as just like being able to fit in with, any situation in a sense. While Queen, everybody's success is dependent on, their role in their situation. But you can make a case and say Queen's is probably more dependent on the absolute right fit and so on. So let's just say I'm an outsider. I follow basketball, a little bit, but I can't understand why Derik Queen is projected to go lower than Maluach, even though he was, like I said, you can say he's more skilled, he was more productive. Explain it in the simplest terms why you think that is.
I think the reason Maluach likely goes ahead of Queen is because of his unteachable traits. He is the longest player in the draft. His standing reach, if he entered the NBA, would be second only or tied for second only behind Rudy Gobert and Mark Williams. And he is, for someone who's new to basketball, very skilled for that development process. So the unteachable traits being defensively, he can play drop coverage and be very impactful. He was able to play at the level of the ball screen and really put great tape out against Alabama, against an All-American point guard and Mark Sears, who would drive and he would impact the drive of a small guard and without having to sacrifice giving up a mid-range jump shot. So he's got unteachable defensive traits, and he's a 99th percentile pick and roll finisher. So a lot of those are dunks, but not everyone has the hands and the coordination to catch lobs, finish with either hand, and he shoots 76% free throw line. So I think while he is a ball of clay to mold, and there's more to mold than there are with many of these other guys that are more formed, I think he's more productive and better than many people think he is at this stage. And yet many people think he's a long-term projection because he's raw, because he's further from his ceiling. I think the picture is that he could be the defensive stopper for an NBA team with offensive upside. Whereas Derik Queen, I think you have to build around his offensive skills, and so there are fewer landing spots, and that's why I'd imagine Maluach goes higher. On my board, I have Queen one spot ahead of Maluach because I believe in Queen's his offensive upside, being someone who's a near all-star caliber player if he's perfectly situated. I'm fully expecting Maluach to be picked higher, though.
So you have Queen as the number one big on Leaf's big board.
I think he can be an all-star, and I don't think that for the other bigs.
So with that being said, what are your thoughts on Maluach's hands? I think that earlier in the year you had some questions about his hands. How are you on that today? Do you feel like they got better throughout the year, or you still have the same concerns?
I think his hands are fine. They're not spectacular. I think I mentioned throughout the year that he's in a very good situation to thrive as a role man. And so I wanted to contextualize that as something that helps him. But really, like, you look at some of the guys of his archetype and recent years, you could look at the Duke guys, his predecessors, Mark Williams, Derek Lively. I think he's even a better vertical spacer than those guys because he's longer.
Lively?
Well, Lively, if you watched him at Duke, I'm not saying that like what he was in the NBA, but if you watched him at Duke, he was a good lob threat, but he didn't finish as well. He was finishing dunks, but anytime he caught anything, he had to come to the ground. He didn't finish well. And Maluach finished very well, even off the ground, because he's so long. And I think the team was uniquely situated to get him really good looks. But I was impressed with the way he was able to finish passes that were bounced to him as well as lobs. And so I don't think he's tremendously coordinated. I think he's more coordinated than many of that archetype. Like Rudy Gobert always catches a lot of flack because he doesn't have good hands. He doesn't have good touch, but like he's an amazing offensive player in his prime because of how much vertical spacing and how great of a screener he was. And that stuff's very well known by NBA teams and coaches and preparation for playing Rudy Gobert led teams. But most people clown on that. And I think Maluach, no one's really talked about, oh, he can't catch, he can't finish. So I think that by that in its own regard is probably a good thing.
All right, best case for Maluach as far as comparison. Is it Rudy Gobert with a little bit more floor spacing?
I don't think you're going to get a 4-time defensive player of the year. And I'm from Utah, so I'm going to be completely honest. I think he's overrated. Gobert is so overhated. Like, he's an excellent basketball player. He's probably going to be a Hall of Famer because he's
Mutombo's a Hall of Famer, then Rudy Gobert's a Hall of Famer. I guess if you look
exactly.
at their,
like he was the single-handed only reason the Jazz were a top 5 defensive team for 5 years in a row. Everyone else on the team was horrible on defense. So I'm a little bit biased. I'd be stunned if he was as good as Gobert in terms of how great Gobert was defensively. But I do think you can get a guy who can be an all-defensive team player and knock down a couple jump shots, and that helps him. I think the NBA is becoming more and more skilled. So I think you're going to get a guy who's a upper-level center in the NBA, and maybe if he reaches his absolute peak, in a couple-time All-Star.
All right. And then what is your ceiling for Derik Queen?
Somewhere in between Domantas Sabonis and Alperen Şengün. I don't think he quite has the passing. He's a good passer, don't get me wrong. I think Sabonis is a fantastic passer. And I think Sabonis is a very good rebounder who carves out space and does things that, gets hated upon because he's not a good defender. I think Şengün is slower footed even than Queen. And so Queen's somewhere in between Sabonis and Şengün in effectiveness. And I think he can be an all-star that leads a good offensive attack, but he needs someone next to him to be good defensively.
That's fair. I think Queen is an underrated passer. I mean, I think Sabonis is good. I just don't think we saw the best of Queen as a playmaker, but he showed flashes. Like there's some left-hand live dribble passes that he threw, and I think his passing film was better in high school than it was at Maryland. But I'm totally buying into Queen as a passer.
I think he's a fantastic passer. I just think Sabonis is extremely rare. Like I think Sabonis is an extremely rare, gifted, fluid, coordinated passer as a big man. So that's not a knock on Queen. That's more just praise to Domantas Sabonis.
All right, up next, we're going to talk about Maxime Raynaud and Thomas Sorber. Shopping for a new car should be exciting and not exhausting, but between the confusing prices and the hidden fees, it can actually feel pretty overwhelming. That's why I love using Car Gurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. They have over 4 million listings, and Car Gurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the US. They verify dealers, they provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and the data you need to make the right choice without second guessing yourself. So if you need a deal that you can trust, Car Gurus makes it easy to compare vehicles side by side with unbiased deal ratings. And the best feature is that they have price drop alerts, so you know exactly when the perfect car is available for your budget. Plus, they have in-depth vehicle details that will give you peace of mind before stepping onto any lot. And it is no wonder that SimilarWeb estimated that the traffic data shows Car Gurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site. So buy or sell your next car today with CarGurus.com. So go to CarGurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. Again, CarGurus.com. All right, we talked about Khaman Maluach, Derik Queen. Let's talk about Maxime Raynaud. Maxime Raynaud is one of my favorite players in this class. I know whatever I say good about Raynaud, I'm preaching to the choir when it comes to you. I've had some interesting dialogue about Raynaud because I've probably been on 25 to 30 different podcast guest appearances in the last 2 weeks. And the question I always get is, who's the sleeper? Who's the guy in this draft that people aren't talking about enough? So I've been mentioning Raynaud. I've been mentioning 20 points, 11 rebounds, first in the ACC in rebounding, second in scoring, made the most threes in NCAA history by a 7-footer. And no, he did not just blow up because he had one good game at the NBA Combine. He's been good all year. So with that being said, I've heard two different perspectives. Like one, I had someone reach out to me, and it was actually a parent of a projected top 5 pick. He says, "Hey man, I like the work you do because I can tell you guys aren't getting paid to say some bull." He says, "You guys speak your opinions. If you like a guy, you say it. If you don't like a guy, you don't bash him. You just voice your concerns." He's like, "This is not like you're getting paid to pump prospects up. I can tell that it is genuinely how you feel." On the flip side of that, someone said that I was an industry plant and that I've been talking about Raynaud out of nowhere because I'm getting paid. I think someone suggested that I'm going to get like a percentage of his contract and something of his rookie deal. And he was just somebody on Twitter that's just making all these comments.
Well, if that's the case, they got to get my bookmarks. I've been talking about Raynaud for 4 years as a Stanford fan.
Right. But
I know.
It's crazy because there's two like sides of it. There's somebody that says, "Hey man, I know you guys are just like, hey, if you like somebody, you're gonna say it." And then on the other hand, someone's like, "You can't be talking about Raynaud this much without getting paid for it. Like you're an industry plant." And then actually somebody tried to say that they thought I was part of Clutch because I predicted Derek Lively to the Mavs correctly. And I didn't even make the prediction. I just said that's who the Mavs should take. So anyway, with that being said, if I'm getting paid for Maxime Raynaud and I'm an industry plant, then Leif is too. So let's give him more to think about. Tell the audience why you like Maxime Raynaud so much.
Well, I'll give the prefacing that I've watched every game Maxime Raynaud's played for 4.5 years. So that's the preface, because I'm a diehard Stanford basketball fan, and there for many years has not been much to sing about. And Maxime Raynaud, I watched him play Tarleton State 4 years ago, and I thought, man, I actually think that the Stanford team has an NBA player for the first time in a while. I thought there might have been one with Tyrell Terry. I had concerns, thought he should come back to school. He had some mental issues.
Technically.
Yeah. So, but my point being is, I was definitive, like, that guy's more skilled than any player we've had, and he has the required skills. He has the prerequisites. And then each season, he's gotten something in his game that's been new. And by his end of his sophomore year, he started implementing a left-hand jump hook, which is very rare because he's a right-handed shooter, and that's his go-to move down on the block. And then his junior year, you saw him get a little stronger. He started going to the rim more authoritatively. His senior year, you watch him this year, and you say, okay, if Cooper Flagg didn't exist, he's easily the best player in the ACC, and that's a storied basketball conference. And what he does night to night is he is the face of the offense. He's able to dictate everything. Post up, he can kick it out when he's double teamed. He can punish a smaller defender. He can pick and pop if a big defender is going to play drop. And he knocks down threes as a high clip. He knocks down free throws, has a left-hand jump hook, a right-hand jump hook, and drop step. Like, everything he does on the block became more authoritative and more refined. And then what I think is better about his game in the NBA is all that unique skill he has is now added space, and he's not number one on a scouting report. He can come off a short roll and use his incredibly swift mind, where you can tell he thinks the game at a very deep level. He's kind of a philosophical guy. He's going to get the ball, and he's going to swing the ball on a short roll to the right spot. He's going to make the right reads when he holds it up top. You can run an offense through a big, as many teams right now are doing. They bring it up and they recycle the ball through the big at the top. And then he's able to knock down threes at a clip that none of these other centers can. Like, everyone talks about Danny Wolf's skill. Raynaud is a far better shooter. He's a better shooter than Maluach. He's a better shooter than Queen. He's a far better shooter than Asa Newell. Like, all these guys that he's compared to, he's a better shooter than, and he's more productive, has more rebounds per game than all of these guys. And you look at, like, Sorber's got a tremendous length. And this is not a knock on Thomas Sorber, but Maxime Raynaud plays with that length on each side. And defensively, because he was so important offensively, I don't think we saw how good he could be defensively, because he didn't want to foul. So his job was just alter shots, not block them. You watch him at the end of the season.
We saw that in the Louisville game. Like,
and at the end of the season, they play in the ACC tournament, and he decides, you know what, I'm bigger and better than James Scott. It doesn't matter. And James Scott's a pretty good player. I'm going to block the shots. I'm too good to not be using my full abilities. And he did so, and he changed the game. And Stanford should have won that game because Maxime Raynaud is fantastic. And I think he should be a lottery pick. I have him 16 on my board, 17 on my board, and I've been saying, so you may be the hype train guy, but I've been saying to my friends forever, this guy should be an All-American for each year, and he got robbed this year. The year before, I said, okay, he's going to be an All-American the next year, and he should be an NBA guy every year, first-round pick. But I was worried. I was just, like, seeing what I wanted to see. And now I watch him play, and I watch all these other bigs. He's just definitively better than all of them except for Derik Queen. And Khaman Maluach, I think there's more upside just because he's played basketball for as long as Maxime Raynaud has been in college. And so therefore, Khaman Maluach at 4 years from now could be a better basketball player. But right now, if it's between Raynaud and Maluach as is, Raynaud is a better basketball player. Queen has a claim, I think, but Raynaud is fantastic. I think he should be a lottery pick, and whatever team gets him is going to get the hardest worker in the draft and someone who's improved each and every season, which is very few and far between. You look at the draft, some of these guys that come back for second years stagnate. It's rare that they improve and get better at something each and every year tangibly, and he has.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. He never mentioned Maluach by name when I did the interview with him, but he in so many words mentioned that he was the premier player, the premier big in the conference. Mm-hmm. And it's just Maxime. Like, there's a combination of him being like just very brilliant, but at the same time, he's extremely, extremely confident in his game. I'm surprised he didn't get a green room invite. But on the other hand, I'm like, again, he had such a good year. And all of a sudden now, like just now within the last 4 weeks, people are saying, oh, he's rising up draft boards. No, man, he did this all year. But the part that people aren't really talking about is Maxime Raynaud. Yes, he's a senior. Yes, he's 22. He's not an old senior, but he didn't become a full-time basketball player until late teens. He was a swimmer. He entered college without a full ride scholarship. The rumor is he was a walk-on, but he told me that wasn't true. He was on a partial scholarship. So with that being said, I think there's still a really good developmental arc with him. Some of the guys may be younger, but they may have been playing since they were 10 or 11. And you know, in today's world, if people think you're tall, they're going to try to put a ball in your hand when you're 2 years old. They can just look at your mom. Oh, yeah, his mom is 6 foot. His dad is 6'5". Okay, he's going to be a 7 foot. All right, let's make him play basketball. Raynaud is a swimmer. And to me, if you compare what he's done over the last 4 years to anybody in this class other than Maluach, you can say he's made the biggest jump. Yeah, it's a difference between making that jump from 15 to 19 to as opposed to 18 to 22. But 4 years ago, nobody was talking about Maxime Raynaud as even being an impact player.
Except me.
Except you. All right, up next, we're going to talk about Thomas Sorber, Danny Wolf, Asa Newell, and Joan Beringer. Hopefully I'm saying that right in my French accent. All right, last segment. We talked about it offline a little bit. Thomas Sorber, you mentioned that you're starting to see him mocked in the teens. Prior to the combine, he was in the 20s. What are your overall thoughts on Sorber? And do you rank him number 4 as far as ranking your bigs?
Yeah, Sorber's got a nice feel for the game, but what really stands out is his length. And so the fact that he measured in with the wingspan as towering as it was makes you a believer that his length was not just overwhelming inferior athletes, that he could do it again. And he's kind of baby faced. And I think
very baby faced.
Yeah,
maybe
and it makes
braces, but he looked like a 14-year-old in the face.
And that's the thing, is it makes you believe that that guy is going to grow physically. Maybe it's not height, but maybe it's strength. And so that's something I believe in. I believe Ace Bailey, this is a slight tangent, but I think that Ace Bailey, often everyone says, oh, Cooper Flagg just turned 18, but Cooper Flagg's face and body looks grown in. Ace Bailey looks to me like he will fill in. And that's something that matters to me. And so in the case of Thomas Sorber, where he's playing a physically demanding position at center, and he's able to block shots against veterans in the Big East, and he's able to control the paint in a conference that's known for their schematics and having veterans on the interior, like Ryan Kalkbrenner. You've got good players in the Big East. And he's able to hold his own and use his length as his weapon defensively. If he's able to fill out, I think he's got a really good upside. And then on the offensive side, I don't think he's as skilled as Raynaud. I don't think he's as skilled as Queen, but he has feel for the game. He makes the right passes, and his shot doesn't look terrible. Like, it's not fluid, and it's not something I'm a huge believer in, but I think that his ability on the short roll, because he makes the right reads and creates the right angles for passes and is able to get to shots that he wants to get to, even at this kind of slender body, not filled out frame. I believe in his upside a bit. He reminds me a little bit of Onyeka Okongwu. Okongwu was like broader and stronger and maybe a better, more explosive athlete. But the reason they remind me of each other is they're both skillful centers who use athleticism to like help them, but it's not their like identity. Because they're not overwhelming you with physicality. I think their skill is impressive. So he's number 4 on my board of the bigs. I think he'll be a top 20 pick. I want to say I have him at like 21 on my board. But I just have this preference for the wings in that area. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up going 15 and warrants that pick.
Yeah. As far as like looking very young in the face, and it makes you wonder how much more can he grow? There's like 4 guys that come to mind. Even though Derik Queen is considered an older freshman, very baby faced.
Yep.
Ace Bailey looks young in the face. Yegor Dimon. I mean, you're in Utah. He looks like his body doesn't match his face. He looks like he's 13 or 14 in the face. If you stand next to him, you're like, dude, you are taller than you look on TV. And I don't even think he's done growing. And we kind of casually mentioned that or talked about that when I saw him at the combine. All right, let's talk about Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf is a guy that I thought the perfect fit for Danny Wolf in the NBA draft was the Indiana Pacers at 22. I thought put him in Rick Carlisle's offense, give them another passer, a ball mover, and some size. I mean, they're playing Tony Bradley some minutes. And I mean, I know they had a bunch of injuries with their bigs from, was it Wiseman went down, Isaiah Jackson went down. I mean, they were playing Thomas Bryant some, but I thought Danny Wolf would be good in Indiana. And then the Pacers traded that pick to the Pelicans. And now I'm like, I don't know what team is the best fit for Danny Wolf. With that being said, what are your thoughts on Danny Wolf, and where do you rank him at as far as your bigs?
I'm a little lower on Danny Wolf because I don't know how many teams can utilize his skill set best. So Danny Wolf, for those of you who don't know, was at Yale and he had the ball in his hands. Then he went to Michigan, had the ball in his hands, and had an excellent season. The big if here, or I should say the big but here, is he turns the ball over incessantly. Like every time he dribbles, you're either getting a spectacular, splendid pass or a horrible one that sails into the fifth row. And I don't know how many teams are going to give him the leeway and the license to have that type of free reign and create for others. And he had a pick and roll with a 7'1" guy named Vlad Golden. And so how many teams are going to have him play the 4 where his lateral speed, he's not slow, but he's not a good defender and he's not a good vertical contester either. He's a solid rebounder. So I just think defensively he's compromised in the NBA. And offensively, he's creative, and that could be helpful. But how good of a shooter is he? So the guy he reminds me of is a guy who's on the Jazz, and I watched from the front row all year, was Kyle Filipowski. Kyle Filipowski, coming out of college, had more of a pick and pop game. His shot looked good. He just didn't make a ton. Wolf's shot looks okay, but he does not shoot well from the free throw line or from 3, and that is concerning. As for Filipowski, defensively, he's terribly inept. Every team attacked him on the Jazz, and that's what most rookies happen. But Filipowski moved significantly better than he did at Duke. Like they were nicknaming him 2-hip flip because he got his hips replaced, and now he's a far better mover, and he still was inept defensively in the NBA. And that's not a shot at Filipowski. It's just the reality. Teams attack the guys that are not as able to move laterally. Wolf can move laterally, but I don't think he can do it as a forward in the NBA, and he's not quite a center strong in the NBA. And Filipowski puts the ball on the floor, makes good passes, but that's like Wolf's identity. He has to have the ball in his hands to create things. Filipowski can kind of do it, attacking closeouts and do different things, be Kelly Olynyk-esque. I'm a little lower on Wolf because there's not that many teams, I believe, fit his skill set. And not that I'm a doubter of his skill set. I just don't think as many teams have the weapons on their roster to bring out the best in him.
Yeah, if he ends up being Filipowski, like has a similar rookie year that Filipowski did, because Kyle exceeded expectations. It wasn't like he came out of nowhere. Like he was highly recruited. And then you can say, all right, maybe his freshman year he didn't move the best because he had the hip issues. And then his sophomore year, he shot the ball better, even though it was in like stages, like slow start. Then he'd have a stretch where he would shoot like 40+% over 5 games, cool off. But he exceeded expectations. He gave the Jazz first round value as a second round pick. Wolf is intriguing to me. Again, I get what you're saying about the passes. Sometimes you're like, that was an incredible pass for a big. And then sometimes not sometimes, but oftentimes you say, he has 2 really head-scratching turnovers this game. Dribble off his foot, like a pass to the 5th row. But I think some of it is because he's not afraid to try to squeeze passes in tight spaces. He likes to go for the home run over singles. And so I think that could lead to his turnovers. But let's talk about Asa Newell. Asa's interesting to me. I know some people that really like him. And I've talked to like teams that have brought him in and they weren't really impressed. One of the first things like someone noticed, and usually I can talk to like some of the assistant coaches, the guys that don't know anything about these players coming into the draft. They may like do a crash course a week before when they see the schedule and they're working the guys out and they just kind of want to know like, all right, what does this guy do? What doesn't he do? Who is he? All right, this is what the scouting reports say on him. We're going to put him through some drills to see if he's gotten better, yada, yada, yada. And one scout or assistant coach mentioned that he wasn't as tall as he thought, and he didn't have a long wingspan, and he has some concerns about what position does he play. So with that being said, what are your thoughts on Asa Newell, and do you agree with that thought, that train of thought?
That's my exact thought. So all year I felt like Asa Newell is a 4 masquerading in as a 5 because his skill set is that of a 5. So let me reiterate that for you guys. I believe fours in today's NBA have to have the capacity to knock down threes. I don't think Asa Newell has that. So then he has to be a 5. I don't think he has the strength to play the 5 in the NBA. And if you're going to be an energetic, like change of direction type of big, he can move. Don't get me wrong. He can move, but he's not like Jared Vanderbilt, like small ball, run up and down. Energy is what keeps him in the NBA. And that's what I think these guys who are underskilled have to have in order to be a 4. So I'm a little lower on Newell. I think there aren't that many teams I feel that confident he can play the 5 because you need someone really strong as a rebounder next to him. And I think that he's got energy and he's got the right mentality. I've listened to him speak and I've listened to the way he thinks, and I'm impressed. But I just don't necessarily see the skill set having the prerequisites to sell me as like this guy can be a 4, and I don't think he's got the size. And that was one of the very few players. I typically don't really care that much about wingspan because it's like I watch all these guys play and I can tell if you're long or not. Like I'm very rarely shocked. But his being shorter than I thought it would be did matter to me because I think he needed to have those extra inches of wingspan, extra inches of vertical to have the chance of playing center at the highest level, because I don't want to draft him as a 4, and that's what I think he is, an underskilled 4.
Yeah, I've had some teams tell me that they like him because they see he's a situational 4 or 5. Like, sometimes he can play the 5, and if the shot comes along, then, maybe he can be a pick and pop 4. But I think some of the teams were concerned about just him not being as tall as he was expected to be and the wingspan. But as far as character, he's very well liked. And I talked to a coach in the SEC, and he mentioned that because he didn't have really good guard play at Georgia, he had to get a lot of his points on the offensive glass, which is why he attacked the offensive glass more than the defensive glass. So interesting guy. Our last one, Joan Beringer. I don't know if you know a whole lot about him, but he's probably one of the biggest risers, and he received the green room invite. To me, just based off the way the draft is shaking out as of today, with his size and his athleticism, I think he's a project. I think he's a ways away, but he did measure well. I want to say he measured out like 6'11" barefoot. Atlanta needs a athletic vertical lob threat, and if he's available at 22, he can make sense for the Hawks. But that's just my opinion. What are your thoughts on Beringer?
So I've watched less of him than I have the college basketball guys, which is no surprise. Every year we do these things, and there's some of them I watch more than others of the international guys, and all the college guys I've watched probably 15 times. So, and if not more for the Dukes of the world. But my takeaway with him was immediately he's got traits. You can't teach the springiness, the kind of what I want to see in a rebounding archetype player. He's got it. I think that his body is a bit baby giraffe in the sense of, like, you watch Tijan Salaun last year and his body just wasn't ready for the coordination necessary to play the wing. And it's less important at a center position, but I think it's an unforgiving learning curve when you're going against some strong veteran presences who have once been that athlete and now have refined their game. So I wouldn't take him in the top 20. I can see taking a flyer on him in the first round, but right now I have a second round grade on him. I think he's a guy that if you're patient with, he can definitely reward a top 15, top 20 value. But I think teams that are drafting 20 through 30, with the exception of teams like the Jazz at 21, or I guess the Wizards at 18, or at 23, the Pelicans, those type of teams, now they can make a swing pick. But if I'm in the NBA right now and I'm a playoff team and I expect to be a playoff team the next year, I wouldn't take a guy like Beringer because I believe in the CBA. You're rewarded for getting value out of your rookie contracts. And so he scares me a little bit if I'm a playoff team.
Yeah, I think you have to bring him along slow. I've mentioned before in previous episodes, I saw him play live at a tournament. So I think I watched him play about 4 games. And I saw the potential, but I did not see 2025 NBA draft. Yeah. I saw maybe 26, best case scenario is what I thought. 27 more than likely. Again, the tools were there. Statistically, he wasn't really great, but you just saw like, all right, man, this guy moves incredibly well. He jumps high. He's not afraid to switch out in space. So it'll be interesting to see how high he goes, but he currently has an invite to the green room, which means he's projected to go at least inside the top 25. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Stay tuned for the next episode where we're going to talk about the guy that is going number one in the 2025 NBA draft. The episode is all about Cooper Flagg. You don't want to miss it. We are out of here.